All right. Well, I got some homework for people this week. Now, the first thing I got to say though, it's really hard to follow somebody with a tie as hot as that. Man, that's a nice looking tie, Toby. That's a beauty.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
I don't think I don't think I have a tie in my entire collection of three ties that holds a candle to that tie.
I'll give you this one then. All right.
pick, pick me up another tie like that wherever you are. I think in Italy or something. Anyway,
Yeah.
like the homework assignment this week, because it's a long weekend, I think a lot of you who watch this video might appreciate a particular video series on YouTube. It's one of my favorite. Okay, it's Gary the Goat, and if you don't know Gary the Goat, you need to look up Gary the Goat. One of my favorite episodes is when they get stuck along the side of the road, and his boot gets stuck in the mud, and he has to have a guy pull out his boot using a tow rope. Anyway, Google or not Google, but go on YouTube, type Gary the Goat has trouble down under. You'll see. You can watch it for yourself. It's a pretty funny movie, but it's a metaphor or it's an analogy for what's happening today. Gold is taken off, like you guys said. You've pointed out that gold's broken out here, and it's fortunately seeming to pull along silver and the base metals now with it. Okay, now last week I talked extensively about silver. Silver's Tavi's favorite, and this constant demand that we find more silver, is getting a little fatiguing. So every once in a while, I like to look at base metals too, just for giggles. But this week I'm going to talk about base metals. I'm going to talk about base metals, a few basics on the base metals, but also what exposure we have through our exploration portfolio. Okay, so go to the next slide.
Quinton, this picture is absolutely fabulous, by the way. Really, really good stuff. I like that. That's really good.
So, look, base metals are loosely defined as the metals you see with the red circles here. Now, a lot of people say, well, what about nickel and cobalt? Oh, yeah, they're kind of base metals, but I consider everything to the left of copper kind of more of a ferroalloy metal. Okay, like usually copper and nickel nickel and cobalt and such, manganese, chromium, vanadium, titanium. Those are all alloyed with, in steel, so in iron, to make various, types of steel that have different purposes. So those are the ferroalloy metals, and then we have over here copper and zinc with the big red circles. Lead's down there, kind of apparently by itself in column number 14. I would also throw tin in here. A lot of people forget, but tin is traditionally considered a base metal. You look at the fact that tin alloyed with copper is bronze. Okay, and in human history, bronze was one of the first uses of metal that we have in on record. All right, so it is an important base metal. Although most people don't even think so much about tin today, but it's important. Okay, go to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to talk about copper first, and I'm just going to give a few basics. I'm not going to do a huge deep dive here, but this is more for just a basic education, and for people watching this video, so you understand, where copper comes from, but also, why we're going to need it going forward. And I'll show you a slide in a second that'll make that impression. Right now, we produce about 22 million metric tons per year. I've seen different numbers, but this looks reasonably accurate. Okay, 22 million tons, metric tons of copper in a year in 2023. It's been kind of flat or slowly rising here recently. Notice that between say 2016 and 2020, it was pretty flat. Okay, we're seeing a slight increase here lately, but it's not taken off. Like a lot of folks say we're going to need to see in order to sustain a lot of the things that Tavi mentioned a minute ago, like this, these basically infrastructure spends and stuff, let alone things like EVs and stuff like that. So I would say copper is going to be in high demand, and we're going to have to see this growth in production Okay, now you say, well, okay, let's dig a little deeper. Let's go to the next slide, and we're gonna first of all talk about what are the main uses for copper. And look, this isn't exclusive. This isn't a thorough list, but mainly copper uses is in things like pipe, water piping and for buildings construction, as well as wire. Okay, and mainly in electronics. So a lot of copper is used in electronics and wiring, obviously, transmission and such. So those are the big uses of copper right there. Go to the next slide. This shows you the production of copper from different countries around the world. Chile has had a commanding position in copper production over many years, in fact, many decades now. But it's kind of slipping lately. It leveled off a few years ago. Now it's starting to actually slip back recently, which is interesting. Okay, part of that is a not exploring or not capitalizing new mines and such. Okay, so that's definitely at play. It's still number one, but it could gradually slip over time if they don't kind of get their get an environment back where it's good to for investment in copper space, building new mines and exploring and such. Peru has actually been growing here recently. It's the second on the list. It's at 10.5%, not as anywhere close to Chile, but it's a significant producer. Okay, China as well. Now, the thing with China is always hard to see or say how much of that copper production is actually coming from China. It might, as opposed to maybe copper coming in the form of concentrates into China and then getting counted as Chinese production. But the data is what it is. It says about 8.6% of world copper is produced from China. Congo, big producer, and that's actually grown here recently. Obviously, with Friedland starting up his mine, Congo is kind of jumped back into the one of the top spots here. I think we're going to see that African copper belt be a juggernaut for copper going forward. Whether it displaces Chile and Peru, kind of gets up to that level, I'm a little doubtful. You never know, though. You never know. Okay. United States, we're at a piddly little 5.7%, which is a terrible shame, guys. I mean, it is such a shame because we here in the United States have some absolutely hands down world class copper deposits that should be in production, in my opinion. Okay. They should be in production. We could be one of the major copper producers. We'd probably outgun Peru if things like the Resolution mine was online down in Arizona or Pebble in Alaska and others, like the up in the Duluth complex in Minnesota, if those projects were allowed to advance. We are where we are. It's unfortunate that we don't take advantage of our own resources and, blessed, mineral endowment, but we don't. Won't get into politics here, but darn. Australia, Zambia, you can see the rest of them. Okay. Indonesia, yeah, that's mainly accounted for by Grasberg, Erzberg. There's a lot of potential in Batu Hijau, but there's a lot of potential in Indonesia. That's one country where, boy, if they ever got their act together, they could actually blow the lid off of copper. Like you could see them climb to second spot very quickly if they reformed and got their act together. All right. Let's go to the next slide and let's dig into the copper production profile looking forward. Okay, this chart's a little bit out of date, so this is a few years old. It's Kerr, I think it's 2014. Yeah, Kerr, but it shows you that there's a peak, or they forecasted a peak just a few years ago, about 10 years ago. They forecast a peak in the 2030 period, somewhere in there. Now, it turns out that peak's actually, very close in time to us right now. And you can see how everything rolls over and falls off. Well, that's because if you just look at the reserves that we have in these different countries, different mines in these countries, that is just a natural phenomenon. Now, a lot of people jump and say, "Oh, that's peak copper." No, peak copper. No. We can do something about this. Okay, it's not peak copper. We need to explore. We need to develop new deposits. Okay, that's how you avoid peak copper. But this is kind of a perspective, and it shows you, the profile of different countries and how they're going to diminish over time. And I think that's an accurate statement. Like um, Chile's going to taper off pretty quick from here. Things like that. So what do we need to do? We need to build new mines or come up with new solutions for extracting more copper from low grade material. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, top 20 copper mines. This comes from Elements. Look, you can see it's kind of a little bit skewed. You're going to have to hold your head funny, but you can see where the big mines are. Many of them are along the western margin of North and South America in the Circum-Pacific belt. And then you can even jump over, like I said, Grasberg is over there in Indonesia. It's over up on the top, actually, in this image, but that's also part of the Circum-Pacific belt. Then you look at it and you say, well, what is that stuff in Africa? The little bars there, that's the African copper belt. Those are where the big mines are there. And we even have one very large deposit in the top 10 or top 20 list in Russia. Okay, let's go to the next slide and look at these things and just look at where they are or what they are. Most of these are porphyries. Okay, I put pink dots next to the sediment host. Hopefully I didn't miss any. I don't think I did, but maybe I did. I put little pink dots next to the sedimentary copper deposits and their contribution. One thing I noticed, though, they didn't look at Poland, which I found interesting. I don't know if they're treating it as separate mines and therefore it doesn't, hit the top 20 list. But in aggregate, Poland actually would be on this list. And it would be sedimentary copper, but that's not how they broke it down in this table, so can't do much about it. But anyway, the point is, a lot of the deposits out there, a lot of the ones that produce the big tonnage of copper on a yearly basis are porphyries. Okay, they're porphyries. Now, it's not to say sedimentary copper isn't important. It also is. We could see growth in that production. Like I said, if Friedland and others in Central Africa have anything to do about it, we might see a lot more sedimentary copper come about. But this gives you a picture of where most of the copper comes from. Porphyries. All right, go to the next slide. And I just put this image together like last week. I showed you where or what type of deposits the metal comes from. Last week, silver, a whole spectrum of deposits. But in copper world, really it's just porphyries and sedimentary copper deposits. Those are the biggies, okay? I've also put VMS on here. It's a lesser contributor. We didn't see any mines in the top 20 list there, but in reality, some of the deposits, even in Africa, there are VMS. So I do think it's a worthwhile target. But these are the kind of copper stories that we like to invest in. Okay, so here at Crescat, what do we have? We have investments in a number of porphyry copper plays. Look at Brixton. Look at BCM in Utah. Look at Bell Copper in Arizona. Even Barksdale. I mean, in a sense, Barksdale is proximal to the porphyry environment. It's kind of porphyry CRD target there, but it is a copper story by and large. Okay, so we have others, but look, the point is we have exposure. We have significant exposure. I think roughly 15% or so of our portfolio at this time is exposure mainly to porphyry copper deposits. Now, do we have any sedimentary copper? Yes. Last week I mentioned Hennigh on the east side of the Andes in Peru is exploring for sedimentary copper. I discussed it in reference to silver last week, but it's equally a very impressive copper target. Like 5 meters or 6 meters. I think it was a 3% copper in bedded form. Boy, when you start talking those kind of grades, it adds up very quick. Okay, so we do have exposure to sedimentary copper. We also have exposure to VMS in some cases. Now, won't take time right now, but let's plow forward, talk about, there we go, where we're looking. All right. This world map shows you a distribution of sedimentary hosted copper deposits as well as porphyry copper deposits. And I've drawn circles. Basically, green are areas we consider prospective and favorable for investing in copper stories. These are places where mines have been built. There's demonstrable evidence that mines can be built in those locations, as well as the discovery of major copper systems. The yellow areas are areas where, for some, one reason or another, maybe cost or, other aspects make it a bit more or a bit less perspective as in terms of an investment, but we're still open to considering. I'm open to considering looking at opportunities in those locations. Red, unfortunately, no go areas. Okay, a lot of people ask us about things in Africa from time to time. Like there was a gold discovery this week in Africa that everybody is quite excited about, and for good reason. It looks like a very good one. But we typically shy away from investment in Africa just because of the jurisdictional risks. Okay, I'm not trying to poke, or degrade any country in Africa in particular. It's just we as investors prefer not to invest in Africa. Okay, even though there is in this case good copper potential there. All right, but let's talk about the most favorable areas. Okay, so I'm going to start over here in North and South America. So if you look at the U.S., Western U.S., great endowment of copper. We actually have a huge position, almost half of the Butte mining district under our control in a private company called Blackjack Silver. Yeah, it's called silver, but in fact, it's associated with the porphyry copper. It's just one of the biggest porphyry coppers in the United States. We're invested in that. Okay, but we have those other investments that I mentioned too. Stake in BCM and Bell Copper and such. The Western U.S., in spite of the fact that we haven't seen a lot of big mines built recently, is still highly prospective for copper. It's a first world jurisdiction. We need to see the permitting regime improve, in my view. But otherwise, I do think if you take a bit longer term view, I think there's a lot of value to investing in copper stories in the U.S. Same for British Columbia and the Yukon. Lots of good copper stories there. We have a number of them that are rambled off. Pacific Ridge, Brixton, such. Like these are big targets that could have huge endowments, say 1 million tons plus of copper, and in some cases a lot of gold too. In the case of Clayhole at Pacific Ridge, a lot of gold comes with that, a few million ounces perhaps. All right, now Alaska is also highly prospective. All right, and one of the VMS stories that we have is the Silver 47 story that took in all of the assets that White Rock used to have in central Alaska, and now they're going to be advancing those VMS systems. And I would encourage people to look at the information for Silver 47 because there is very high grade copper VMS discovery there. They found it in float samples, like pieces of rock, but it looks really intriguing, and I do think the company's going to drill it this year. So those three circles in North America, those are areas where I consider, investing in copper is worthwhile. Less so in Mexico. President in Mexico just, boy, banning open pit. Don't start talking like that. So I kind of downgraded Mexico, the central part of the U.S. Where there's sedimentary copper potential. It's interesting. I haven't seen any compelling, investment cases lately for investing, say, in Michigan or somewhere like that. But there is good copper, sedimentary copper. There is sedimentary copper up in Nunavut too, and I wouldn't mind dipping my toe in there. I do think it's expensive to work in Nunavut, but even over in Eastern Canada, in New Brunswick, Newfoundland, those are good places to look as well. Mainly for VMS. Now, down in South America, I'm really feeling good about investment in Argentina at this point. I think the political situation there has improved dramatically. And I really think if there's listeners out there and you want to start thinking about copper exposure, like look at a lot of the copper stories. We're involved with Mogotes, for example, private company. It should go public here soon. It's immediately adjacent to the Filo discovery. Okay, like this is, and the geology looks fantastic. I talked about it a few weeks ago. Okay, so there's really good opportunity in Argentina, but I also see that continue up in Peru. Peru has done a 180. They've improved the mining space tremendously over the past year. All of a sudden, permits are coming out very quickly. It doesn't take you 2 or 3 years to get a DIA. You can get a permit in Peru very quickly, probably within 2, 3, 4 months. At this point, that is a wonderful outcome, and that because of that, I'm very keen on seeing investment in Peru once again. Panama, look at what happened to First Quantum. No go zone for a while. Most of Central Latin America. No, we're not going there. Okay, even Colombia. Have there been any big copper mines built in Colombia? Not really. Okay, Colombia has great potential, but we're not seeing the mines get built, nor are we seeing them advance in places like the Dominican Republic and the Caribbean. Unfortunately, great copper deposits, but until we see that, what was it, Ramiro deposit developed, I can't see investing over there. All right. Australia, certainly. Okay. Any day. It is kind of high cost in Australia. It's, it's a bit daunting, but along the eastern margin of the country, there are a lot of older porphyry belts. This isn't Circum-Pacific stuff. This is older uh, porphyry belts, such as down in New South Wales, where Inflection, one of our investments, Inflection is working. Okay, big porphyry discoveries and mines. You've got Cadia and such, North Parks and stuff. These are massive, world-class copper deposits. So yes, Australia, no problem. The Oceania area, from New Guinea over through the various islands, a bit of caution, but I'm actually thinking that's a good place to be at this point. And I went and looked at some stuff. Couldn't get a deal done there last year, but I am kind of keen on the prospectivity there, but also the ability to work. Same in Japan and Southeast Asia. I think there's merit in looking at opportunities in those locations. Up in Europe, mainly in Southeast Europe, there's porphyry potential. Okay, there's also sedimentary copper potential, but mostly I'm interested in the porphyry potential in Southeast Europe. Up in Scandinavia, that one green circle that's way up in the upper left, great VMS potential, and also IOCG potential. I didn't talk about IOCGs. Yes, they are an important copper contributor, but they're not a major one like you could see in the top 20 mines. There's none in the list there, but they are important, and there are some really good opportunities up in Scandinavia. All right. So that's the way I think about copper, and those are the areas that we're focused. We do have a lot of investments already inside those green circles, and over time we'll probably be taking some more. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now I'm going to talk about lead and zinc. I'm not going to, again, it'll be an abridged version, but these two charts are similar to what I showed for copper. Again, this apparent peak that comes off. In this case, you can see the scale's a bit different there. So each tick mark on the bottom axis there is 50 years. You can see how, things fall off actually fairly steeply for lead and even for zinc. Okay. In the next few years, we haven't explored for these metals. Tavi just showed you a picture of the decline in the investment in exploration or exploring for zinc. It's like crazy. It's gone to practically nothing lately. Okay, so we as geologists, as well as the support we've gotten from the financial community, has been bugger all, and we've basically shot ourselves in the foot. And I think if there's any metal, we'll call it unloved metal out there, that I'm really focused on right now is zinc. I'm telling you, we've failed to explore for it. The decline in zinc resources is going to be very sharp, and we need to take advantage of it. Okay, and that's one of the reasons we picked up San Cristobal like we did. We are the 15th largest zinc producer, I believe, right now. Again, we're huge, but we need to look for more. We need to do more things. In fact, we are looking at other opportunities, acquisitions. We're looking at some, elsewhere in the world right now. We'll talk a little bit about that maybe in a couple of slides. Go to the next one. Okay, what are these metals used for? What the heck is lead used for? Well, batteries. Okay, everybody's got a battery in their car, a 12-volt battery. Yeah, that's where most lead goes. Now, a lot of that gets recycled. Okay, so you do see a lot of recycling of lead, and it's reused in batteries. But it's the dominant use. Now, you might say, well, geez, that's kind of a dead end. And you know what? If EVs take over, and look, there is some need for batteries in EVs, like they need a little 12-volt battery, a lot of them. But you're not going to see the demand for lead be so high in the future, probably. Okay, that's the bet of many folks. And therefore, lead might be like the dodo bird over time. The uses for it might be less and less and less, which means, that's interesting, because lead's mined often with zinc. Okay, that's why you see both of them on this chart here. Lead and zinc deposits almost always go hand in hand. Very seldom do you find a lead deposit or zinc pure deposit, something like that. They're almost always together. Okay, so it's an interesting dynamic. If we don't need so much lead in the future, but we need things like zinc and silver and such, then it's kind of weird because you're mining those metals, but you're really mining lead just as a way to carry your silver, for example, or something. Like the whole dynamic shifts as we see a reduction in lead demand. Topic for another time, maybe, but it is something to stick in your memory bank there and consider. Now, zinc use, on the other hand, ain't going away anytime soon. And what's most zinc used for? Galvanizing. Okay, galvanizing is when you coat steel with a thin film of zinc metal. And it's basically what keeps steel or iron from rusting away. Okay, if we didn't have zinc, um, all of the buildings we have, all this steel that we use for various things, cars and such, would rust away very quickly. Okay, it's very important that we galvanize anything made out of iron, almost, because if you don't, it will degrade over time, very quickly over time. So zinc is basically a key element in keeping civilization propped up. Okay, and you're not going to see, like, even if the economy contracts a bit, you're not going to see that diminish. You got to keep coating stuff in zinc, or you get in trouble quick. Okay, so I think zinc's got a good future ahead of it. Yeah, it's used for alloys and other things, but mostly galvanizing. All right, let's go to the next slide. Here's where it comes from. China, huge producer of zinc. Again, how much of that is actually attributable to mines in China? Up for debate. I think a lot of the 32.6% is actually concentrates that are brought in from other countries, maybe not quite in ways we know. But I do, China is hands down the biggest zinc producer and certainly smelter. Okay. Now, Peru, interestingly, is second, just like with copper. Peru is second. And, it's a fraction of what China is, but it is an important zinc producer. Australia, big zinc production from those sedimentary hosted deposits in the eastern part of Australia. India, not too many people think about it, but VMS deposits in India have a lot of zinc, and it's always been a big zinc producer. U.S., just like copper, if we had our act together, we would have lots more zinc production. Unfortunately, we've dwindled down to less than 6% of the world's share of zinc production, and I find that very disturbing. Most of it comes from Red Dog, which is a sedimentary zinc deposit in Alaska. Otherwise, a lot of zinc production in the U.S. is, just from dribs and drabs from various mines, mainly for silver and such. We need to see a revitalization. Mexico is also a significant zinc producer, mainly CRDs and things like that. But, again, I think there's a lot of potential that's untapped. Bolivia, wonderful place. We are in Bolivia now. I'm going to make a prediction. As time goes on, I think we can make Bolivia, we can push Bolivia up as we, San Cristobal, operate there, I think, and then take advantage of other opportunities. Even some of our investments, like El Oro, for example, as they develop that project, we'll see Bolivia become a bigger and bigger zinc producer. It could be second or third over time. Let's go to the next slide. Here's the largest zinc deposits. You can see Red Dog, that one I mentioned earlier, Tech. It's in Alaska, okay, and it's been producing for just year after year, like just crazy numbers, super high grade, highly profitable mine. It produces a whopping 500,000 tons of zinc metal per year out of approximately 14 million ton per annum worldwide production. So it is a major, major producer. And then you can see right below there's Hindustan Zinc. That's I said VMS earlier. I meant to say sedimentary exhalative. Then you got the big systems in Australia. Glencore's operations, and then Antamina. That's a skarn. Okay, so sometimes around porphyries, remember you get skarn immediately adjacent to the porphyry, and then CRDs outboard from that. You can get some systems with a big zinc endowment, and Antamina is one of those. Okay, and I find that very interesting because I think there could be more Antaminas in Peru that could be exploited. That might be one of the things we're working on. Okay. Again, look, I won't read them all off there, but you can get a sense. Most of these things are basically sedimentary exhalative or some sort of skarn, manto, vein, whatever, associated with porphyry. There's one VMS way down there at the bottom, Cerro Lindo. That's in Peru. All right, let's go to the next slide. So here's like I didn't put VMS per se on here, but I kind of include it up in that top upper left, like a submarine style deposit. I didn't write specifically VMS there, but most of the zinc deposits we have formed in subaqueous environments, either as SEDEX deposits or VMS deposits too, or MVTs where you had fluids come up into the limestone reefs along the margins of the continents. Okay, they're not CRDs; they're a different type of deposit. But this is the location of most zinc formation on Earth. Now you do get in CRDs. Okay, you can get outboard from a porphyry. You can have skarns and CRDs, like I said earlier, and there's a lot of zinc in those. Some of those are world-class zinc deposits, like that Antamina deposit I mentioned earlier. And then occasionally you do get zinc as an important component of porphyry deposits too. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, where do I like to look for zinc? Again, we got green, yellow, and red circles here. I really love most of North America for zinc exploration, and that goes from the western margin, the circum-Pacific margin from Alaska down through the western U.S. Lots of porphyry deposits that also have a good shot of CRDs and things like that. So that belt is just a prolific zinc belt that I think is worth investing. Most people don't recognize, but in central U.S., there are MVT, Mississippi Valley type zinc deposits. Those are prospective. I have seen a few opportunities to invest in those, and maybe we jump in there at some point. And then over in the eastern seaboard in Canada, you have VMS deposits. So I got a green circle there. Mexico, still hesitant about the president down there, but there are some wonderful CRD deposits, lots of zinc that are probably worth looking at. Up in the far, far north of Canada, there are some MVT and sedimentary hosted zinc deposits, but man, is it expensive to work up there. So I put a yellow circle around that. Now, going down to South America, Peru, Bolivia, and even northern Argentina and Chile, I think that's a great place to look for zinc. Okay, I'm very keen on that. I think all of those jurisdictions, particularly Bolivia and Peru, are wonderful places to operate right now. Argentina has also improved, so I see those as winners. There is a belt of MVT deposits in Brazil. Maybe we look at Brazil there, Tommy. I don't know. All right, now let's jump over to Europe. You say, well, why is there a green circle around Ireland? You say, oh, geez, you know what? Ireland is one of the biggest zinc districts on Earth. And guess what? We are looking hard. Okay, I was in Ireland earlier this year. I really think Ireland could be resumed to be one of the biggest zinc districts on Earth. Very keen on that. I'm also keen on Scandinavia. Some of those VMS systems that host copper also host zinc. There's also potential throughout Europe, Southeast Europe, Spain, even Northern Africa, where there's a number of opportunities for zinc investment. I am liking it more because the European Union is putting a lot of pressure on countries now to develop their mineral resources. They're like, hey, guys, we can't just export all our mining overseas. We got to start exploring and developing our own deposits. And that's a new trend. Okay, that I think is a good trend. Asia, unfortunately, guys, you know what? I just can't see investing in India, certainly not Iran or Turkey, unfortunately, right now, certainly not China. Those ain't going to happen. But I'll tell you this, there are some deposits in Iran that if they ever got developed would probably flood the zinc market for the next decade or two. They are huge. And it's probably just as well we don't see them come online anytime soon. We'd probably see zinc at about 20 cents if they did. Okay, in Australia, absolutely, no question, looking at zinc opportunities there, especially sedimentary hosted ones like Maronan and others. Africa, look, all the best to Robert Friedland. I'll let him mess with Africa, but that's just not a place I'm going to spend a lot of time or investment right now. But they do have some world-class zinc mines, and one of them is going to start later this year. All right, so that's what I see, and I am looking. We're actively looking at opportunities to buy assets that we can, do something that's similar to San Cristobal. All right, so there are zinc mines out there cheap, and we might take advantage of that.